It's crazy to think that just a year ago, I was still married to my ex-wife. She took everything from me. My friends, my house, my things. And because of the death threats I received, I could no longer go back. A little more on that later. You guys have been following me for a while. You guys have been on this journey with me. But if you're new here, buckle up. It's gonna be a crazy ride. So first, I have to explain the story of how I ended up in Colombia. In January of 2020, I made the decision to sell all of my things and book a one-way ticket to Colombia. I didn't know how it was gonna pan out, but with nowhere else to go and an unwavering belief in myself, I decided to take a leap of faith and go on the adventure of a lifetime. So after selling all of my things, I had a small sum of about $4,000. So the reason why I had the confidence to sell all of my things is that I auditioned to be a cruise pianist, and they told me that they were going to place me within March and April of 2020. So the idea was to go to Colombia for a few months when I was able to start my cruise contract, fly back to the US, and then take off on my new job. However, the first week in Colombia, I received an email saying that after watching my audition again, they felt that I was not ready and could not offer me a contract. This ended up being a blessing in disguise though, because COVID came and completely decimated the cruise industry. So I was stuck in Colombia with no backup plan, completely unsure of the future. Due to the pandemic, I was forced to stay in Colombia. And since I didn't have anything tying me down back to the US, I decided to stay and create a new life. And little did I know, my time in Medellin would change my life forever. A couple months into Medellin, I had my first experience with violence. I was walking back to my apartment with my headphones on when two guys with a motorcycle came up and approached me. They started shouting some things in Spanish, and my Spanish wasn't so good at the time, but I remembered them saying something about Chino this, and as I tried to get closer to hear what he had to say, he took a swing at me. I dodged his initial punch. He was able to kick me and it grazed my knee, which ended up leaving a mark. I shouted super loud, "Que pasa?" trying to alert the attention of the neighbors, and once people started looking at the street, the guy got on a motorcycle with his buddy and eventually took off. This is the first time in my life that I ever felt fear like that. And I remember being afraid to leave my apartment for weeks. One of the tricky parts about being in a new country is that everybody knows what I look like. They get to blend in with the crowds. That also adds to the layer of danger because they can come at me whenever and I don't remember what they look like. To this day, I don't know if they were trying to rob me or jump me because I was Chinese and they blamed me for the pandemic. A couple of months later, I had to call the police on a roommate that I had. I was renting a room from this Colombian guy and everything was good for a few months, up until I told him that I was going to leave. I never signed a formal contract with him and he changed the terms on me. He first said that I had to pay till the end of the month, then I had to pay 30 days, then I actually had to pay until the end of next month. We ended up having a dispute in the middle of the night, which I recorded. He refused to let me leave and he forced me to sign a contract saying that I would pay him for the next 30 days.
De agosto. Yo, Wesley, voy a cumplir mi palabra de avisar con un mes de anticipación desalojo de la habitación. Lo vas a firmar y lo vas a leer. Lo vas a leer.
The next day, we showed up with police, but since I had no knowledge of the law, I was forced to pay him regardless of how he coerced me. Fast forward a few months and I was living on my own in a new apartment. It was an incredibly lonely time because I didn't really know anybody in this new country and I was starting from the ground up. We couldn't really go out and meet people because everything was still shut down. I started seeing this Venezuelan girl and we hooked up after a couple of dates. The relationship kind of fizzled out, but after a couple of weeks, I received news that she was late on her period. Now, before you say it was my fault, you have to hear the situation. So we had sex 3 times that night. The first time we used a condom and I finished in the condom, as most people do, but I didn't clean up properly or use the bathroom. The second time, we only did it for 2 minutes without a condom and I didn't finish inside of her or anything. At that moment, I felt so uneasy about it that after a couple minutes, I went and cleaned up, and the third time that we did it was with a condom again. She even took the Plan B pill the next day to be safe. But with some incredibly bad luck, the following week, we found out that she was pregnant. I told her that if she wanted to keep the baby or if she wanted to have an abortion, I would support her either way. In the end, she decided that she wanted to have an abortion. This was probably the most traumatic event that I ever went through in my life. Even though the baby was barely a fetus, I truly felt like I murdered my child. And it was because of this experience that I decided I needed a big change in my life. That's why I started seeking God, and I ended up meeting. So I eventually moved to a smaller city called Manizales, where I got involved with a Christian church called Congregación Cristiana Manizales. I was a perfect candidate for them. All alone in another country, bad relationship with my family, desperately trying to find community, and ready to accept religion after my traumatic experiences in Medellin. They love bombed me from the beginning and told me how God told them how special I was, how they had a love for me that they couldn't explain. I was taken in by a specific family who helped me with everything. They helped me move apartments. They were always there for everything everything when I needed them. They always told me how much they loved me. That was one of the first times I knew that my family was different. To be honest, I never felt like I could go to my aunts and uncles for help. And I remember when I was struggling back in the US and I told them about my situation with my father and how we were fighting all the time. None of my family members, none of my cousins, none of my aunts and uncles ever reached out to help me. So that was the first time in my life where I ever felt like, oh wow, this is what family is supposed to be. They really made me feel like I belonged, and most importantly, loved. It was at this time that I met my ex-wife. I felt like this family was specifically trying to set me up with her because every time I would be invited to a place, my ex-wife also happened to be there. We spent a lot of time together and we eventually started going out. I was in love with her from the beginning. The way that she carried herself, how everybody spoke so highly of her. She told me that she was looking for a traditional man and she always dreamed about being a traditional stay-at-home mom. And that's what I thought I wanted at the time because I was young, all by myself. I really latched on to what all these red pill creators were telling me I had to do. I was also so in love with the way the family made me feel, which I think heightened my emotions towards her. After a year and a half, we got married. I noticed that her behavior started changing around 2 months before the wedding. I'm not sure if she just felt comfortable to show her true self because we already had everything planned and it would have been too detrimental for me to back out of the wedding, or because she started taking birth control at this time and the hormones started affecting her behavior. She started using the argument of a religion and God to control every aspect of my life, the kind of people I could hang out with, the kind of music that I could listen to, the kind of places that I could even visit. I felt like I was being suffocated in my own house. It also felt like she made no effort into compromising on our marriage because every time she would ask something from me, it would be because she needed this as a woman and this is how the Bible says I need to treat a woman. But as soon as I asked her for something and she didn't agree with it, she would use the Bible as her shield to be like, oh no, God does not want us to be this way. I will pray that God changes your heart. I noticed that she always valued the church's opinion over mine. My expectation as the man was to be the 100% financial provider, but I had no authority in my household because every time I said something and she didn't agree with it, she would go to the church to back her up and the people in the church would defend her on everything, no matter how much she was in the wrong. Things got progressively worse throughout our marriage until one point I threatened separation. We were fighting a lot until one day I received a message from the father of the family that took me in. He was expressing his disapproval of how I was handling my marriage, how he would defend my wife against anybody who was dangerous to her, how she did not have to change for anybody because that's how I found her when I married her. I was angry at the man for meddling in my marriage, but I was more upset at my wife that instead of trying to handle these things in-house, she went to outside help without me and only told her side of the story, painting me as the bad guy. All of the trust that I had for her was gone and I knew that I was in a bad situation. Things escalated to the point where the man who sent me this message eventually started sending me death threats. He sent them to me in an audio message on Instagram and deleted them right afterwards. But I had the smarts at the time to record it as evidence.
Sé que usted aquí de Colombia no conoce sino la parte buena, pero usted acuérdese que sabe que usted está en el país más violento del mundo. Y estoy esperando que venga y ojalá me busque. No quiero cogerlo sino para matarlo, marica.
When I showed my wife the death threats, she chose to defend this man over me. At that point, I knew it was over and that I could no longer go back to my marriage. During this time, they sent me several lawsuits. Number one, I had to delete all the videos I had on my channel containing them, which was around half of my videos at the time. So overnight, half of my channel gone. Because I had a special brother-sister relationship with the daughter of that family, they claimed that I was trying to manipulate and abuse her because she was a minor. And number three, they also went to the immigration office trying to get me deported. When I tried to solve things peacefully and tried to negotiate my stuff back, they tried extorting me for a large amount of money so I can get my stuff back. When I refused to pay, the man who sent me the death threats sent me an email trying to apologize for his behavior, but it wasn't an apology at all. He was just saying that he regrets some of his actions, but it really turned into him trying to lecture me on how I needed to be a real man and take care of my ex-wife who's going through hard times financially. But it didn't make any sense for me because any money that I would give her would just go towards a lawyer trying to fight me in the divorce. I also caught them going through my Instagram, which they unfollowed a bunch of people from the church and I think they started deleting messages, but they were also looking for evidence of infidelity. They obviously did not find anything, and as soon as I found out, I changed my passwords immediately. One of the things that made me uncomfortable about Colombia, everybody was always staring at me. And it was cool in the beginning because I was receiving a lot of attention, but once I realized how unsafe Colombia was, it felt like I was walking around with a constant target on my back. In this time, I also realized that I was always going to be an outsider, no matter how good my Spanish was. I filed a formal police complaint against the man who sent me the death threats, and after a month, I filed for divorce and I fled to Asia. After that whole situation, I figured I needed to go on a journey to rediscover myself. I felt that I had lost myself in my marriage. That's why I really wanted to go back to Asia so I could reconnect with my roots. I first went to Thailand, where I spent most of my time smoking weed, eating, playing video games, and practicing Muay Thai. After receiving those death threats, I felt like I really had to take classes for self-defense. I also met this really great girl in Chiang Mai, and we ended up spending a week together. Thai culture is truly special to me, and it was the peace that I needed after experiencing what I did in Colombia. Afterwards, I spent a few weeks in Vietnam. Da Nang is probably one of my favorite cities in the whole world. I had such a blast there. I spent my time mainly eating, enjoying the beach, and living like a local. It helped that I looked like everybody else, and it was nice finally being around my own people again. Also, Vietnam has the most beautiful Asian girls in the world. I stand by that statement. After that, I went back to the Philippines to spend time with my extended family. I visited my grandpa's grave. I spent a lot of time with my cousins. It showed me the big differences in the way that my dad raised me versus how some of my other cousins grew up a lot more restrictive. I also asked about how my dad grew up. It made me understand him a lot more and humanize him. Now I understood all of the struggles that he faced when he first immigrated to the US and had to start from zero. Even though I really enjoyed my time there, I knew Southeast Asia would not be for me, so that's how I ended up in Poland. So I don't regret the marriage at all, because it was at the wedding where I was able to repair the relationships with my parents and my sister. It's one of the moments in my life where I felt, wow, God is truly real. So what's next? Honestly, I ended up liking Poland a lot more than I thought. My priority right now is to build my YouTube channel as big as possible, but also to find a good partner. After all of this traveling alone, I realized how much I truly value the company of a good woman. One of the mistakes that I made in my 20s was because I was in such a rush to do everything, I made so many impulsive decisions. This has led to my biggest successes, starting my YouTube channel, being successful in music, but it's also led to some of my greatest failures, such as my marriage and my restaurant. I feel like a lot of people say that you need to have a plan for your life, but my life is so dynamic, I have no idea what's going to happen a year from now. In the next couple months, maybe I'll be on a game show in the Dominican Republic. Maybe I'll start dating a Polish girl. Maybe I'll start dating an Asian girl. Really, who knows? I've just accepted the fact that you can't control what will happen in the future. And honestly, if you're so focused on achieving one exact thing, you miss out on a lot of the beautiful things that life has to offer along the way. If you guys want a detailed explanation of everything that I went over in this video, you can follow the My Life Story playlist on my channel. Please give the video a like, consider subscribing. If you wanted to support my content, consider becoming a channel member or donating to the channel. Thank you guys all for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.